1 in 4 young men between ages 15 and 34 say they felt lonely a majority of the day, the previous day. This is the loneliest male generation ever recorded. 15% of men say they have no close friends. That's 5 times higher than my generation, which was 3% back in 1990. More than half of men under 30, over 51%, are single. This is the highest rate in U.S. history. Men are 4 times more likely today to kill themselves, to die by suicide, than their female counterparts. Nearly 60% of young men between 18 and 24 still live at home. It's the highest since the Great Depression. Only 27% of men have 6 or more close friends. That's down from 55% back in 1990. 61% of Gen Z men say they feel no belonging at work. Marriage at 30 has dropped from 65% in 1980 to 36% today. Volunteerism, worship, civic engagement, once the staples of a community for men, have fallen to record lows. 1/3 of U.S. volunteers are men. That means 2/3 obviously are women. It's disproportionate. The list goes on and on. 25% of U.S. men 15 to 34 report being lonely every single day. That's 1/3 more than women. We have an epidemic of men and loneliness in this country, in this world in general, but especially your generation, Gen Z.
What do you think from your experience counseling men ranging from guys in their later stages of life to younger stages of life? What do you think is the root cause, or maybe top 3 causes from your experience, not from these statistics, not from any data, of this loneliness epidemic in young men?
Well, there isn't a single point, because there's never a magic bullet that makes it all go away. And if we could just do that thing, it's all better. It's like anything in life. It's complicated. You know, the most important things in life don't fit well on a bumper sticker. And so we're going to have a lot of podcasts, I think, on this topic, but let's dig into your question. A handful of them that come to mind. Number 1 is the phone, right? I think that I know this is an absolute novelty in human history. Never before have we as human beings had the ability to look at our hand and what's in it while we're sitting in a group of people. So we are living in a hyper individualized society, not without some blessings and positive, wonderful things. So don't get me wrong. I'm not, suggesting we all become, go back to the 1800s and try and pretend. However, I think that that's a big one. I see it with, your siblings and their contemporaries sitting on the couch, 6 people there, not one of them is talking to each other. They're all talking to their phones. It's a strange phenomenon. We got to dig into that. Another one, because this is a male topic, not just your generation's topic, is the war on boys, the war on men. So I'll set that one up. We can dig into it. I'd say those are the 2 that jump out the top of my mind, the war on men in particular, and the advent of technology, that we've never been more connected technologically and less connected humanly.
So I have another one that comes to mind, and that is, it's actually from the book Iron John, where I read about this, is that boys don't have the experience of apprenticeship and learning firsthand a skill or trade from their father and witnessing their father in work in the same way that they used to, when their father had a certain set of skills, would perform that in any sort of setting and come home and show the boy as he was being brought up those skills. Now, it's amazing that we don't have to work in factories and have a specific trade that, not all of us at least, some of us blue collared workers, for example, would. But for the guy working at a tech job or going to the office all day that doesn't have a specific physical laboring job where they can pass a certain skill on to their young boy, that boy is not witnessing what his father is doing all day. And so what Robert Bly goes to explain is that has a profound effect on the boy's growing psyche.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Absolutely unequivocally true. We should dig into that. We should also dig into the educational system. It is not designed for boys. It's designed for girls. And there's a lot of data that supports that. So we send boys through a process that doesn't necessarily speak to them or isn't built for them, and they end up failing. And you can see it in the educational rates. Anything else you want to throw on the list?
I mean, a big one we can unpack is tech and the phone, because there's a few different aspects to that. Mm-hmm. There's the general experience of loneliness that is true for men and women, which is tech connection isn't real connection. It's not intimacy. It's not touch. It's not eye contact. It's not shared experience in real life setting. And then there's the experience that is specific to men, and that's pornography, and the way that the widespread accessibility of sexual gratification online is hindering men in romantic relationships.
Huge. I just read another statistic. I don't remember what it was, but it was that by, I don't know what it was, 20 or 25, a staggering amount of young men have not even approached a woman, right, to ask them on a date face to face. Like there's this skill set that's just being lost. And so yeah, we can go down a whole rabbit hole on the porn sexual thing. Let's start sort of broader with that one. Because guys, men, boys, up to a certain age, I don't know what it is, I think 25, the prefrontal cortex is not yet developed. And it's much earlier for a woman. And so this is why you see deaths of despair, risk-oriented deaths. They're disproportionately male. If you look at, all of the things of drunk driving, of the driver, not necessarily the victim, or, I don't have to convince anybody here that young men are stupid by design, right? There's just this process that a man has to go through, a boy has to go through before he can think wisely or intelligently with his prefrontal cortex. And so now we're putting these devices into his hands, and he's making really bad choices. And it's just an instant gratification, a hit on that part of his brain. And then you put in front of that, porn stimulus and say, good luck, right? Which dovetails back to your other one, the mentoring. There's nobody there to mentor him. You know how many guys, men I talk to who have never had the conversation with their son about porn, and yet they've handed them the phone, right? And back in my day, we had to sneak into my dad's closet and find your grandfather's stack of Playboys, right? And then we had to work for it. And then you knew what was in there. Like it's a quantified set of pornography. Agree with it, don't agree with it, doesn't even matter. Like there's only so far you can go with these images. Now you put that phone in your son's hand and you say, hey kid, good luck navigating this. I didn't have to navigate that, right? And so these men aren't mentoring their sons, and they just assume they'll find their own way. They're not finding their own way.
I think we're going to see some alarming data come out in the next 30, 40 years when the first generation, my generation, to have a cell phone grows up, and we start to see the real long-term differences between, let's say, your generation and mine, simply because we have these technologies available to us. And not that it's not helpful, but it's being given to young kids without any long-term knowledge of what this does over someone's lifetime.
Yeah. Because again, my frame of reference is a very different one than yours on this one topic of pornography. And so I can't conceive. Of course I've been exposed to it as an adult, but my prefrontal cortex is developed. I don't have to grapple with it. I'm not looking at this, even though I'm looking at the same image as somebody who's 15, I'm not, because I'm looking at it through the lens of a mature, developed male human being. And so I think what's going to happen is, you're right, your generation is going to grow up and go, how in the hell could they have put this in my hand and not known? But I say the same thing about like cigarettes and my parents' generation. You watch Mad Men or one of these old, sort of 60s era TV shows, and the doctor is smoking and blowing it in the patient's face. And I sit there from my vantage point going, what the hell? What kind of idiot didn't know, right? It's not for us to judge looking backwards. It's too complicated. All I know is your generation is going to grow up and go, they put a phone with unlimited free porn into my hand as a 15-year-old, 13-year-old, whatever the age is. Crazy.
That brings me to another point that we haven't touched on, and it's the chemical and the hormonal disadvantage that men today have. If you look at the data, I've seen it in a few different places, it shows that male testosterone levels have severely declined over the last millennium. And you see that for a few different reasons. It's partially because of the food industry and what men are being fed. I'm sure technology plays a certain part of it, the sedentary lifestyle that we all have become more accustomed to compared to people 100, 200 years ago. But what makes a man chemically, testosterone and other hormones to support it, have begun to fail. And like male fertility rates have declined, not to alarming levels of there will be no future, but alarming levels of how is this affecting the male drive to pursue and succeed and conquer, not just in terms of going out into the world and making a name for oneself, which is important, but also within one's own personal development. Those chemicals and hormones play a huge and important role in a man's drive to fulfill his fullest potential as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Biological, hormonal, and it's always a combination. It's nature and nurture, because the nature is changing. It's also not changing. Men are still wired as hunters. Thousands and thousands and thousands of years, millions of years, we've been hunting. And people are shocked by this one little idea. It's not a statistic. It's just an idea that I realized a long time ago, because I'm passionate about the differences between men and women so that we can help each other succeed. And I believe we make a massive mistake when we say we're the same. And here's the most obvious example. Men come into this world hunting. All beings come into this world hunting. The masculine is sperm, right? The feminine is egg. How does it begin? By a bunch of sperm fighting each other to win, to be the sperm that wins the race. We come in with competition. We come in with single focused. We come in hunting. And the feminine, there's one. She rests. She is much more at peace, right? She receives and she's fought over. And so you just look at this primal example. Our DNA is our DNA. Most young boys I know like to break shit. Most young girls I know like to talk to shit. When I used to play with, you and your siblings, you and I would break things, or we'd build things, or we'd go out and, kind of destroy things. And your sisters loved playing house. Now I know it's stereotypical, and I know it's not true for everybody everywhere, but no matter how hard I tried to try to reverse the roles, didn't come so readily or easily. And so I just think we've underestimated the power of our DNA. And I want to come back to what you said, and yet we're starting to change the chemical balance and the wiring. But the wiring is the wiring.
Yeah, and we've kind of been touching along all of these points that would automatically make someone feel hopeless about the future. And I that's what I don't like about these conversations is what I'm feeling right now is this kind of a sense of hopelessness. It's like, what do we do? Because so much of this feels outside of my control. as an individual, because a lot of this is ingrained in the world we live in, and in the shared beliefs we all have, and in just factors that I cannot change personally. So let's come back to and weave in what is in a man's control within this entire situation.
Can we make this personal and talk about you specifically?
All right, let's do it.
Because you're an example, I think, of a young man who's not quite so young anymore, who's gone through the school system. You graduated last year as we're recording this, and you did it, right? I mean, you did it well. You're able to do it in ways that I certainly wasn't, straight A's kind of thing. However, I saw it take its toll on you, right? Sit down, face forward, use your brain. That's our school system. It is a neck up school system. It is designed. This is one of the reasons why so many boys struggle and they're dropping out. Look at the stats of how it's flip-flopped from graduation levels. It's staggering how much has changed over the past 30, 40, 50 years. One of the reasons is boys are not wired to sit still. This is why boys are disproportionately labeled with ADHD, because there's this hunter piece, going back to what I'm saying. There's a hunter piece in a boy that needs to win the race, to compete, to get out, to go experience. So I've seen you struggle like chafe against this. Yes, you can do it neck up, but your body and your spirit and that other primal hunter piece of you has really resisted it. And now I see it in the way you're approaching graduate school. You don't want to just keep recreating the Western sit down, face forward, shut up and learn model. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
I would say the pros of the education system that I went through, I'll just speak to at the university level, is that it teaches you how to think, but sometimes doesn't arm you with a set of skills and a craft that you can take and immediately apply in the world. So an example of this would be in psychology. I learned a lot about how to approach research and how to be a psychologist in the terms of, here is something that's occurring in human behavior or in the brain. What is everything that is contributing to that? And how do we analyze the causation of that or whatnot? And in other fields, this isn't necessarily true. People do leave with a degree that gives them a certain skill set that they can take away. I think to education majors. I know people who studied elementary education and it was a pipeline right into the school system where they had teaching experience built into their curriculum, where they went into classrooms and learned to teach students, and now they're teachers, right? Or a lot of people in the engineering school leave and they have a job immediately waiting for them because they've learned how to approach whatever it is they're learning, and they've taken in a certain skill set that allows them to go into the workplace and reproduce that. Other fields, they're not arming you with those same skills. You have to work beyond that to try and apply the gifts and the passions you feel for the subject. So what I do take away is that I understand how to articulate myself a lot better when I have an idea or a thought, to put it on paper, to analyze it, to take a bunch of ideas that may not be connected and string them together in a sound argument or an essay. But beyond that, taking everything I've learned and bringing it into the world, I don't feel like I have much to show beyond what I've done outside of the classroom. And that's been where I've learned the most, is in my own pursuits in different leadership roles or positions. From that, I've understood people, how to navigate relationships, approach different kinds of individuals, lead by example, share a common mission and inspire others with that mission. that element of psychology I've only understood through experience. So for someone who's going in and may want to be, let's say, a healer, may want to study psychology so that they can go and help other individuals, from my experience, the degree that I pursued wouldn't give someone the tools to do that.
Well, first of all, this is why I think we should really rethink higher education. I have a bunch of buddies who I grew up with who are much more blue collar. They ended up trying or did go to college, either failed out or, were high and drunk the entire time to numb themselves because they hated it so much. Because we have this system that is, the majority of people shouldn't be doing it. We should have more trade schools. Like these guys would have benefited by learning a skill, going out and doing the thing. And by the way, electricians and plumbers, these people make a lot of money. So they would have been happier. They didn't want to go sit in a classroom. They couldn't sit still. They had to numb themselves to just make it through, if they made it through the 4 years, accumulating debt that they don't need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to start there, that not everybody should be in the situation that you were in the first place, not every male. We need more military service. I think I would have been better served if I would have gone to the military first. I would have made a better use of my time in school. Just like in Israel, you have to go to the military first. That's why fraternities and sororities don't exist in Israel, because fraternities and sororities are the stuff of bored high school kids that need to fill the experience. I'm not saying they're wrong, but when you go to the military, you come out, you don't have time for sorority formals.
You also come out with a sense of brotherhood. If you served in the military with a group of guys that you had to trust with your life, that's a form of brotherhood.
That's a fraternity.
And that's what fraternities try and mimic through other processes, like whatever hazing goes on.
Exactly. So it's like this artificial version of it. Like, why not have the real thing? Maybe you don't have to go to war, but, mandatory service, I think, would transform the nature of education. But that's back to this sort of masculine approach, which I think our educational system in many ways has been feminized. We've taken experience out of it. You describe applied sciences or applied education. I'm not saying it's only for boys or girls. I am saying it's masculine. Masculine is goal-oriented. Masculine is task-oriented. This is why so many men I counsel get into trouble with their wives when they go into a conversation and the woman is explaining her feelings and the man is, what is he trying to do? He's trying to fix it, right? It's a primal masculine thing. I'm solution-oriented. I'm looking for the end result. How do I make this work in the world? And we're missing that. I don't want to chuck the feminine process of communicating and marinating and no sort of goal in mind with the outcome. The point is to learn. Liberal arts, that is the point of liberal arts. I don't think you should come out saying, I have to be able to apply my knowledge of literature to the world. I think there's a place for processing and feeling and emoting and thinking about it, but we also have to bring the now, what do you do with this for those looking for it?
I would also argue that where the masculine does show up in certain education systems in an unhealthy way is within the almost the religious structured aspect of academia, where anything that feels and seems like it doesn't fit in a scientific theory that has already been proven and tested and is by the books is deemed hearsay, especially in psychology, where there's so much more to psychology than what some of these courses are teaching, because a lot of the research is coming from years and years ago when we had a lesser understanding of the human psyche, of the human spirit, of the interconnectedness between the self and nature and others around us and spirit. And so what doesn't fit that traditional model of psychology in this structured system that is deemed okay to teach by the American Psychological Association and is accredited and certified, that there's this large overseeing body that says this is psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that does not fit within that model is generally rejected.
That's heresy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, that's the worst of the patriarchy, if you will. Like, matriarchy and patriarchy have shadows and light. And some of the strength of the patriarchy is structure. Like, there's a process, there's a stepping stone, there's a hierarchy, and it can become calcified and rigid and can just exist to exist. And that's so much of the academic system, right? Where the high priest is a tenured professor. Same thing, right? And it's this sort of, you do not veer from the path, which is why, how many logotherapy, Viktor Frankl's psychology, how many logotherapy masters or doctoral paths are there? Almost none. How many Jungian? Very few, because these are heretics in some ways.
Yeah. And I look at the difference between the program I was in and some of the programs I'm looking at now for graduate school. And it's so much more undefined, for better or worse, where the path is chosen by the student as much as also chosen by the program and the professor, where, and I'm sure this is true of all graduate programs, but the way that you move through this next stage of education is not just through what you're learning in the textbook and in the lecture, but from some of the programs I've looked at, you also practice these different therapeutic skills with your peers in the classroom. And it seems very woo-woo and unethical in some ways to be trauma dumping on fellow peers and having all this stuff come up in the classroom. But I've spoken to people who try this method where it's a very hands-on, intimate approach to learning and understanding how to become a healer or a therapist, versus other people and other programs that hardly get to practice any of the theory that they're learning.
Yeah, it's experiential, which again is how, back to the male psyche and why there's an epidemic of young men, is because young men need to experience, right? People do in general. Men in particular need to experience. This is the first period of time in human history we haven't had war, where young men haven't had to go overseas, to go somewhere and fight. Now, I don't want to recreate that just to give them the experience. Let's be proactive and create healthier, constructive experiences. But I love some of the programs you're looking at, like wilderness therapy. How do you go out into the woods and kind of survive as part of your training? As an aside, when I went through rabbinical school, the culmination of it, and this was a very progressive new way to approach traditional Judaism, was to have a Talmud exam, 100 pages. Basically, I had to memorize 100 pages of Talmud. And I'm like, you haven't broken the paradigm. I feel alienated and lonely in this because I'm not a neck up person. I never have been. I wasn't you. I didn't get good grades. I forced myself to grin and bear it through elementary school and high school and college and grad school and doctoral programs. I hated it. So I said to them, how about I make you a deal? They turned me down on this. I said, how about I don't do the Talmud exam? You drop me off in Egypt and I will walk to Israel over the course of 49 days and I will survive. And then you can call me a fucking rabbi. And they said, yeah, no, we don't think so. And I was serious because that's what I needed. Doesn't surprise you though.
No, that's not a surprise. And I've heard that. That's so typical. But I get the message behind that. And that's kind of how I felt. Obviously there's a way to the world that we can't always change. And that's, yes, they need to ensure that people are licensed properly if they're going to be dealing with a vulnerable population of those who are suffering from mental illness. I get it. But I feel that there's a better way to allow students to experience, whether it's in the field of psychology or someone who's becoming a rabbi. I mean, those aren't all that different. Firsthand experience of what it means to go on that journey. Mm-hmm. When you can do it yourself, whether it's walking from Mount Sinai to Israel, or whether it's going on a a nature quest for a week and having this intense inner experience, both physical and spiritual. Once you can do that yourself, it's so much easier to offer it to others because you've experienced it. How can you give something to someone that you yourself haven't received as well?
Totally. And so, coming back to our topic, how do we remedy this male epidemic? Give young men more experiences. Bake that into, it's not a bug, it's the feature, it's the thing, right? You just described most of your profound experiences in college happen outside the classroom, not inside the classroom. So anybody listening, I would say, treat the extracurricular things as the education, not as maybe I should let myself do it. Do that thing. And the more novel it is, by the way, I'm not talking about just getting high and getting drunk over and over. There's nothing novel in it. Like, go on a real adventure, try something new. I said this to you when you were at college, go to the symphony, right? Just because it's there and you've really never done that. Go do a class on something that is not going to lead to your academic degree, but is interesting. Those are the types of things we've got to break through to give back to young men. And I see it happening in education, mostly in private education. Your brother goes to a private school. He's 14, and they have amazing educational opportunities because they're experiential. Creating a startup, building your own little entrepreneurial venture kind of thing. That's where education needs to go if we're going to speak to the hearts of young men.
I want to tie this back to some of the work that you're doing because, again, returning to that idea I shared, that a lot of this can bring up feelings of hopelessness. Because these are systems and shared beliefs and ways of being that are greater than us in some way. It's kind of ingrained into our collective unconscious in the world we live in right now. And so what is in our control? What can we do on an individual level to change this? This morning, I looked up at the quote I have on my wall. I went outside, put my feet in the grass, put my tefillin on, stared at the sun, and I said the prayer, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So it's the serenity prayer said often in AA, NA, and that whole world. I learned it while I was at a treatment center in southern Utah when I was 17, and it was profound for me to hear because I was currently living in a system that gave me absolutely no control over any of my external circumstances. But what that teaches you beyond the program itself, which we can talk about whether that was effective or not another time, what it teaches you is that when you have no control over your external circumstances, right? When you have the serenity to accept the things you cannot change, which is generally all that is outside of you, you ask for the courage to change the things that you can. Courage is the key word here because it's easier to recognize the things that you can change than it is to actually act upon that change, because it's scarier. Trying to change other people is scarier than trying to change is easier than trying to change yourself, because we can all look at the things that are within our locus of control and look at them and be like, okay, I don't know if I want to really put in the work to change that. And like, I'm guilty of that. I woke up this morning, said the prayer, and could think of 5 things that was like, that's not a today problem to work on. But the last part is key, the wisdom to know the difference. And so I hope from what we're talking about and what we'll go into about your work gives people the wisdom to understand the difference between what is in your control and what is out of your control. What is in your control is you can take it upon yourself to surround yourself with other men in your stage of life that are seeking similar things, that are asking similar questions. And so that wisdom to know that that is something that is in your control is something that I think you've been working on, teaching men that that there is pureness out there. I'll let you go into that now.
Yeah, no, back and forth. This is great. You said a lot of beautiful things. I want to sort of start with something that almost doesn't sound connected. So there's many reasons, but there's a reason I think your grandfather killed himself. And I wrote about this a lot in my forthcoming book, in my last book. And that is when you would ask him how he was doing, he would say, "I'm fine." Right? This is like the most devastating response a human being can give, I believe, because I can handle the dark depths of hell. And I certainly love hearing about the heights of heaven and, those moments in life. But fine is the kiss of death. I want to create a bumper sticker that says, "Fuck fine," because that's my mantra. Why? Because fine is, I'm not going to look at it, right? I'm going to sweep it under the carpet and I'll deal with it another day. I mean, that's kind of what you said this morning, is it's just easy to sweep it under the carpet. And most of our problems aren't monsters. They're just these little fine bugs, and it grows and it grows and it grows. And we just keep deferring it. I always say darkness delayed is not darkness denied, right? It's not the same thing. You're just delaying it. We got to deal with the darkness. Got to rip the Band-Aid off, fuck fine. And I know there's a lot of guys or people listening who are just sick and tired of being fine with their job, fine with their marriage, fine with their kids. We didn't sign up for fine. And that's part of this. That's the starting point to me. You don't have to be always broken to want to do this work. You can just be sick and tired of fine, and you can want to dig in. But why don't we? Because it's fucking hard and scary to rip the Band-Aid off and to look at what's underneath there. Oftentimes it's easier to blame circumstances. They're the problem. That's what you said before. It feels easier to look at their problems and start to fix them than to, well, you know what? I've been through 4 relationships. None of them worked out. You know what? I'm the common denominator. It's a me problem. I have this conversation with guys all the time who are dating, and they keep telling me why this other person is wrong or broken or whatever. I'm like, you're the common denominator. So let's start with you. And that takes courage, like you said.
I want to back up to something you said about the question of how are you and the response of fine. How does a person define fine when the how are you may not be a genuine how are you?
Right.
Because I feel that fine is just a reaction to the question, which most of the time people don't want to know the answer to. Mm-hmm. When someone asks, "How are you?" at a function that they feel obligated to say hi to you at, you're going to respond with fine, because there's no authenticity to that question. It's simply a box checked.
So there was a movie a long time ago, Jack Nicholson. I just blanked on the name of it, but he's a lawyer. He says, you want the truth? You can't handle the truth. And that's what I feel like when somebody asks me that question, do you want the truth? Right? You ready for this? They're not ready for it. So your point is well taken. So I'm going to put the onus back on you, the recipient of the question. Surround yourself with people who can handle the truth, who want the truth, who invite the truth. That's a men's peer group, right? We say fuck fine without saying it. Check it at the door. You come in here, tell us the truth, highs and lows and everything in between. Nobody ever talks about being fine. They talk about the highs and the lows and everything in between. And so I would say maybe we're not surrounding ourselves with people who want the question answered. And maybe that's a me problem, not a them problem.
So what's the first step to finding these people that say fuck fine in return, that you can share the full spectrum of experiences that you go through with?
Well, first you got to want it. You got to want them. So do an inventory on who your circles are. You have your sort of immediate and concentric circles out. Take an inventory. Are you surrounding yourself with a bunch of yes men? Are you surrounding yourself with a bunch of void dancers? I call them avoidance. They void dance, dancing around the void. Or are you attracting to you people who can handle the void, who want to face the void, who want to support you into the void? What's happened for me over time is a friend of mine says he never fires friends. They just end up moving separate ways because they no longer have that shared interest of going deep and being real, and they fade away over time. If you do this work, be prepared that you will lose friends. You must be willing to sacrifice, not just in the friend department, in a lot of departments. And if you're not willing to sacrifice, and you're not willing to feel the feelings, and you're not willing to face the fuck ups, don't do the work. It's okay. Go back to sleep. Take the blue pill. You know what? I would rather somebody take the blue pill, go back to their routine, to the fine, than to take the red pill to go down this path and not really want the consequences of it, because it ain't easy. It's just not, but it's worthy.
And there's a lot of consequences that come with bold decisions, because those decisions come with a curriculum. You say this to me a lot, like choosing a path of life that is anything outside of who you are now and your comfort zone comes with a set of lessons. And no, this is not the same lessons that you would sign up for if you were taking a university course and choosing a certain major. You're majoring in the way of life that you want. And that comes with different degree requirements.
Tests.
Yeah.
Tests. And be careful what you wish for, because you're going to get it. You won't be able to. I was coaching somebody a while back, late 20s, on the cusp, says to me in theory he wants it, but then he didn't want to give up Xbox. Like, I'm not telling you to give up Xbox, but now you're struggling with Xbox because you're opening up these conversations that make you question what you're doing with your free time. And you say you want more meaning and purpose and connection and intimacy, and then you're numbing it with these other, and it could be fill in the blank, Xbox, drugs, whatever. I said, I am not a moralist. I am not telling you it's moral or immoral. It's not. It's amoral. Chemicals you put in your body are amoral. Alcohol is amoral. It's not good or bad. It's what you do with it. Xbox is what you do with it. But if you expect to continue to be able to numb and enjoy that numbness of playing Xbox while simultaneously reading Man's Search for Meaning, good luck with that, right? You're going to have to choose at some point. Ultimately, he chose Xbox.
That's okay.
That's okay. I had no judgment. Really, I legitimately mean no judgment. I do not want to force anybody. I've tried. You can't force somebody down a path of truth, of their truth. And I believe they'll get to it either through a shattering or when they're dead, right? One of those two things is going to happen. And one way or another, you're going to have to face what's on the other side of Xbox. And it's up to him as to when that happens.
Well, I love having this conversation. I hope it's helpful to anyone that may be listening to it. And that's I feel like the essence of peerness is not just celebrating the highs together, but also being able to relate on the struggles, on the things that are outside of our control and fucking frustrate us.
Oh, you swore. You never swear.
Yeah, well,
sorry.
Sometimes
it's hanging out with me. I'm sorry.
Sometimes it's warranted, and yeah, it is frustrating. But I think finding pureness in that can be the antidote to frustration, because if someone else is going through it, it's a little less frustrating. It's like, oh, I'm not in this alone. I'm not doomed to suffer this by myself. So. Yeah. Just to wrap up here.
Why do we have to wrap up? Come on, let's keep going.
Well, we have a few more episodes to film.
All right.
We can get into different topics, but share a little bit about how to get involved in a peer group.
Yeah, I would definitely want to come back to another time on the statistics that I shared and ways to defy those statistics. One of which is to take off the training wheels. To welcome, to invite in discomfort, challenge, conflict, shattering is what I call it sometimes, as an invitation. I want to do a podcast on that. I want to do a podcast on in human history, men have never done this work before. You brought that topic up, whether it's mentors or whether it's peers. We need to create communities of support. And there's so many other topics, but let's kind of wrap up with that one. We created men's peer groups for this reason. You know, when I was, certainly when my grandfather was growing up, fraternal organizations were the thing. Rotary and Elks Club and the Masons and all these societies and fraternal organizations. And I don't know anybody anymore who does those things. I'm sure they exist. I'm sure their age is pretty skewed older. So those things have gone. You know, churches and synagogues, certainly in the liberal world, have plummeted with men's participation and affiliation. And I'm not talking about the bullshit, you know, you go on Yom Kippur or Christmas. Like, I'm talking about part of your daily rhythm. And it doesn't exist for the majority of men I know. So all of these places and spaces have disappeared. And yet the human psyche and this primal hunter piece of me hasn't. And I need to hunt with other men. I need to know what that means and how to do it and be held accountable and have these conversations. And so we created men's peer groups as a modern space to address those ancient and perennial needs of being in community with like-minded, I'd say like-hearted men. And we need men to support us in ways that my lovely wife, Ariella, can't support me, doesn't want to support me. It's not hers to support. I need men in my life to help me do some of this work. And so we created men's peer groups for that reason. We've been scaling up here in Denver in person. We now have them virtually. And that's been amazing too. And I'll have a lot more things around men's peer groups, men's peer retreats, which is going to be a big one. You know, just stay tuned, jump over to menspeergroups.com if you want to learn more. But yeah, that's what we're up to. And that's what we're committed to.
All right. Well, appreciate you taking the time to do this. And my message is always that if one person changed in any way, even 1%, by this episode, then it was a full success and worthwhile. So yeah. I hope that that's the case.
And I would just say, anybody listening, if you've listened this far, you don't have to agree. I don't agree with everything I say, for the record. I don't agree with anything everybody says. So it's not about agreement. It's about, are you interested in the conversation? Do you want to get into it from a place of good intention and be a part of the solution to solve some of these problems? So please, I welcome your input. I welcome your pushback, your challenges. It's all welcome and necessary on this journey.
All right, then. Well, until next time, cheers, y'all.
Take care.